All right. So make sure you're in the right class, skills and techniques. Make sure I'm in the right class. Um, yeah, my name's Grafton Eliason. Um, yeah, this is like my 20th year here, which is crazy. Uh, and this is one of my favorite classes, skills and techniques. One of the reasons it's one of my favorite classes is because it's not your average lecture class. It's really experiential. Um, I teach this class. Normally, I teach theories. Um, this semester, I'm teaching crisis instead, trauma and crisis, and then I teach either practicum or clinical field. But I've taught most of the classes at one point or another. Um, so let's see. Um, bum, bum. Yeah, so I'll tell you briefly about myself, and then we'll talk about the class and my teaching philosophy. If you've had me before, you know what my teaching philosophy is, but you get to hear it again. Um, so let's see. Um, yeah, I think for a lot of people, especially myself, it was a long and winding path to become a therapist, a clinical mental health counselor, and a professor. It's nothing that I had imagined that I wanted to be when I was younger. Um, I really didn't like high school. I liked the social part. I liked sports. I liked, you know, other kids. But I always had trouble with kind of like authoritarian nature of high school teachers, at least from my personal experience. I know things have changed now. So if you're a teacher, hey, good for you. Uh, but um, I was graduating, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was working at North American Moving, doing pretty well. I had through high school, I had worked there moving boxes and packing trucks, and then they put me in the garage, which is what I really wanted to do, and got to learn a lot there. Um, but if I was living at home, my parents wanted me at least to try some type of higher ed. And we had a school just like Cal U. It was just like Penn West. Um, and it was called Shippensburg University. But the buildings were even built in the same style during the same period. And the reason they opened these campuses throughout Pennsylvania is that they all originated as teacher colleges. And you might be wondering, why did they put them in such rural areas? They seem to be in the middle of nowhere sometimes. And the reason is because they thought if they put a teacher college in that rural area, all the people living in that area would go there, become teachers, and stay. And that's how we got most of the teachers in these rural areas from these state colleges. And uh, and so, I agreed to try it, and I just had a wonderful experience. And I always thought to myself, wow, these professors, they got the best life in the world. Uh, that would be my dream to teach at like a Pennsylvania State College. But nothing, wasn't even thinking about that seriously. Um, since I was trying it out, I'm like, well, I'm just going to take something I like. I liked reading, so I was an English lit major, and I psych minor. But the teachers gave all the students individual attention. It's like they cared about us, and they treated us with respect, and I just it just changed my view of what education could be. And I think every professor in the counseling department kind of carries on that mentality, and hopefully you experience that as a student as well. But yeah, winding path. I was kind of a searcher, always reading about different religions and all kinds of things and mysticism. And so one of my professors, uh, he knew that about me. I signed up, I wanted to go for a master's degree, because once again, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So let's get a master's degree. And so I signed up for all of these writing programs around the country. And he said, why don't you sign up for one religion program? So I did, just to humor him because I really liked him. And and all of the writing programs turned me down, and the one religion program that I never thought I'd be accepted to accepted me. Um, so so it happened to be at Princeton. Never thought I'd be accepted, but I got to study in India and like at an ashram up in the Himalayas and all kinds of interesting experiences. And I ended up, focusing on one religion. And I had this rural church in Appalachia, and there were no hospitals. So in order for me to get the job, I also had to agree to drive the ambulance because so uh so yeah, so I did the ambulance, and I worked with a lot of youth, and nobody had any money. And there weren't any hospitals, there weren't any counselors. So they'd always come to me with their issues. And I really felt inadequate. I didn't know how to help them. And so I went back to Shippensburg. I'm like, I'm going to get a counseling degree so I can help people, in need. And so while master's program exactly like this one, and my professor said, "Hey, while you're there, why don't you get a school counseling degree?" And I'm like, "No, I had a really bad experience." He's like, "All the more reason you can talk with all the kids that are having a bad experience in school." And that sold me on it. And so I was an elementary school counselor for a while, and I would still be elementary school counselor. Also had a little private practice, and um, private practice. I thought I would just be talking with people about, I don't know, their life purpose and existential crises. But I was the only male therapist in the small town, and I just got referred a lot of kids who had experienced abuse. So that's how I, became, uh, you know, uh, well trained by my peers in trauma and crisis and abuse. And I'd still do private practice and be an elementary school counselor. I loved it. But my professor said, "Hey, they opened up this new program at Duquesne in counselor ed. And why don't you go before your life changes?" And he meant, before I had kids and all that stuff. So I did, and taught at different places, Duquesne and the Citadel, and I started one of the programs at Chatham. And but as soon as I heard about an opening here, I'm like, wow, that's my dream job from 20 years, 10 years ago. Uh, and I've been here ever since, and I love it. Really is my dream job. And yeah. So yeah, that's my story. I got four kids, three teenagers, and one 7-year-old that really pushed back my retirement quite a bit. Uh, so let's see. Um, so let me tell you, and you're going to get a chance to share about yourself as well after the break, after we go over the syllabus and everything. We'll do an icebreaker because I think this is one of the classes that's so experiential that you'll really get to know one another, and you'll carry on those friendships, hopefully forever. I still have close friends I made in my master's program, and skills and techniques was one of the classes I really got to know each other. Um, yeah, so my philosophy and this class. Um, so my philosophy is all about mastery learning. And if I could make every class pass fail, that's what I would do. Because I believe that you either know the material or you don't. Like if you go and have to have surgery, do you want the surgeon with an A, a B, a C, you know, in whatever surgery you're going to get? It's like you either know it or you don't. And uh, and by mastery learning, it's not all or nothing. So I was on a committee that does outcomes for the university. And we got to see how everybody measured their outcomes. We measure ours through our CACREP accreditation. So it's really standardized. But I would see whatever degree it was, and they would said, we reached 70% success rate in the national exam. And they were proud of it. And I always said, what are you doing for that other 30%? And because we have like a 99% pass rate, and that's pretty good. And that's like the first exam, everybody passes it eventually. Uh, so, if somebody's not doing well, if somebody's struggling, I think that is not just about them. That's about teaching style. And, 70% is not good enough if you are performing surgery. It's not good enough if you were a therapist because you might not be doing surgery, but these are people's lives that you're working with, you know? So I think before you go out into practicum and clinical field and see real clients, you got to know the basics. And, you know, so that's why, I designed this class and theories the way we do it. And not everybody teaches this way, but, I think that uh, you get to try again until you get it right, till you demonstrate that you know the basics. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to know the basics. Um, and you can just keep trying until that happens. And I just see it as practice. I don't see there as being any shame or, I'm not a bad student if you don't succeed the first time. You're just going to practice until you get it right. Um, so, there's no exams or papers or discussion boards in this class. It's all about practicing with your partners and demonstrating the techniques. And then we kind of watch it together and everybody gives feedback and you get to try it as many times as you like. Um, so when I was in school, we didn't have Zoom or video technology, so everything was on a cassette tape. And so I would just drive around and listen to my tapes in the car. And even today, if I made a tape with another professor, I'd be able to critique it. I'd be able to say, oh, Grafton, maybe you should have tried something different. You know, um, what was that facial expression you were making? Did you have gas or like were you feeling some way about what this client said? So, there's always room for improvement. And, for everybody, even, me too. And, let's see. Um, I think that one of there's a few difficult things. And let me talk about my fears first, because I think you'll have some of the same fears. I think my number one fear was I don't want to cause any harm to anybody. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to, miss something that I should have seen, you know? But that's why we have classes like this to practice and to and then you have plenty of supervision. You'll have supervision for the rest of your life. So it's not like I'll graduate, no more supervision. No, you got to have supervision for your insurance, for your LPC, for everything. And eventually you'll have peer supervision. You know, you'll get with some other therapists and have peer supervision. Right now, like I'm working in at St. Clair Hospital in Mount Lebanon outside of Pittsburgh in their severe psychosis unit. And we always, every day, we meet with peers and talk about treatment and what we experienced and how our groups went. Um, you know, it's a constant thing. It's a good thing to get feedback and some new ideas. Um, so, you know, I think that you'll have enough supervision and practice that, you know, causing harm uh, should not be one of your worries. It's always good to have it in the back of your mind, keep you on top of things, but you know, my second my second fear was that I'd run out of things to say. And if you're with a client for almost an hour and you're done talking in 15 minutes and they're not saying anything, what are you going to do for the other almost 45 minutes, 40 minutes? And so, you know, um, one of the things that I realized is that uh, if a client isn't working as hard as you, then something's wrong in the counseling scenario. Um, so if a client is upset or rude or changing the subject or making jokes or not talking, it's usually a form of resistance because they're anxious or upset about something. And so rather than going with my agenda, we talk about the resistance. And that usually gets them into a different mindset. Um, so one of the things I had to learn personally was, you know, because of my fear of not wanting to hurt anybody, because of my fear of running out of things to say, uh, I learned all my theories, I learned all my skills. Every time I went into a session, I was prepared. I had like, okay, this is what we're going to do today, and I had a plan, a treatment plan, uh, and then you know, and everything was okay, but it was kind of boring, and and I wasn't getting those aha experiences that I witnessed my older professors getting, who had a lot of life experience. And so I asked one of them, I'm like, I told them they had seen me, you know, in class, and I'm like, I'm just not getting those really insightful moments that where the client gets excited. And they're like, well, you know, maybe you're ready to hear this, Grafton. And uh, so, you know, they're like, Grafton, you're a control freak. And and I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, you have such a fear of failure that in order to navigate that anxiety, that fear, that you plan everything, you control everything so that everything goes right. But if it goes your way, it's not going the client's way. And so, you know, I thought about that a lot and went to therapy and, uh, you know, realized that I had to give the client control. And I had to trust that I knew my skills, I knew my theory, I knew diagnosis, and whatever happened, you know, I'll be able to respond to it therapeutically. And if I didn't know what to do, I could say, you know, I'm not sure where to go with this, but I'll ask, you know, and I'll get some help with it and I'll learn from that. We don't have to be in control or perfect or know all the answers. Therapists are humans too, but you do have to know the basics. And the next thing I learned about that was that I was starting to get some of those really meaningful insights with clients. And just as much as the client was learning, I was learning as well. And one of the things I learned was that, because, if you have good empathy, you can put yourself in the client's place to some degree. And, I think humans share a lot of similar experiences and emotions. So we learn about ourselves as therapists as well. But the other thing I learned was that not only did I have to give up control in therapeutic sessions, I had to give up control in the rest of my life. And that changed everything. And, my relationships got better. Um, liking myself got better. It was okay to be imperfect and human and learn from my mistakes. Um, and yeah, but that's just my journey. Hey, there's a million issues that, everybody has different ones. Some people have the same ones. Um, but I think the reason I bring that up is because making a tape of your session, everybody wants to be in control. And I think that's something that everybody will share in this class. So, you know, um, our goal is for this to kind of be natural, you know, not to sound like you're reading from a memorized list, uh, not to always give the same answer, but to be genuine, authentic, empathic. Um, yeah, because I mean, even when I was a student, students are taught that they have to perform a certain way in order to get an A. And that's just not going to happen in this class because, grades really don't matter. And it's hard to get away from that. Um, so, um, the way we learn in this class is the way I learned when I was a student. And first of all, I always hated when professors would have their notes and they would be giving a lecture and everybody would be writing furiously. Sometimes they'd say, "Could you repeat that?" And I'm like, "What the heck? Just give me your notes. You've already got them written down." So I'll give you all my notes so that you can focus on what a conversation is and participate. And, so participation is really, really important. And, you know, um, but so, yeah, we learn from lectures. I give you like, I'll talk about what we're going to be doing in our first tape, you know, and that'll be two different lectures. But then we're going to practice that. So we learn from practicing. And the toughest part is practicing at home. It's easy to practice here with a partner. It's kind of like, a lab almost, but it's hard to practice at home because you got to ask somebody else, "Hey, can I practice these skills?" And it's got to be like a friend or a family member or something like that. So it's hard to do that. But you need to practice. You need to force yourself to practice. You can, practice with your partner over Zoom. That's the magic of technology. You can practice from home during the week. I know everybody's busy, but the next way we learn is by actually making recordings, video recordings, using your skills with a partner. And, you know, uh, these recordings, like let's say you do a 30-minute session, That's a long time because it's 30 minutes for you, it's 30 minutes for your partner. That's an hour right there. And you'll probably stop and start over a couple times. But then I want you to watch your video, critique it yourself before we watch it in class. Because most students, they don't want to inconvenience their partner and do it a second time or third time. So, you might think, oh, well, maybe it's good enough. Maybe I'll show it to the class and Grafton will say, it's good enough. But don't put me in that position. Don't make me be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. You know, I just redo it 2 or 3 times before you show it to the class. Yeah, it'll take a few hours. We're only going to do 2 or 3 the whole semester. And that's what your entire grade's about, which just needs to be meeting the minimum requirements. So, you know, the good thing is, let's say you still, strike out on some part of the tape, you know, and we say, hey, try it again. You know, I don't say you failed. I don't say, wow, that's a horrible job. We all talk about how to improve it, what you might have missed, other things you could have done. And we say, try it again. So you get another chance or two, whatever it takes. But we're only going to watch it once in class because we have so many people. Usually I only have 12 people in this class. I think we have 18. So that's a lot. Um, so we have to do a minimum of 2 tapes. If we have time, we'll do 3. The syllabus says 3, but we have to do a minimum of 2. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It might take longer to watch everybody's tapes because we got extra students. We might talk more about them. It's okay if, tape 1 takes an extra week or 2. I'd rather, talk about what we need to talk about rather than rush through it. So we might not be exactly on time with the syllabus, but in reality, all we're doing is making 2 tapes. It's not like you have all these different assignments. But if you do have to redo it after we watch it together, try not to be defensive about it or upset because you didn't fail. You're just trying again. Just see it as more practice. So that's another way you learn. You make the tape, we all watch it together, and you receive feedback. Hopefully, more feedback from the class than from me. Because another way of learning is by giving good feedback to your peers. And that means being respectful, being kind and empathic. Most students say, oh, I'm going to give feedback. You did a great job. That's nice, but are people really going to grow from that? I want to hear feedback that is kind, empathic, respectful, but also will help others grow. So maybe they said a reflection one way. And you might say, oh, I like the way you said that, but I would have said it a different way. And that's just me. And you give them the example. Or if you think they did a good job, what was good about it? You have to be descriptive. Why was it good? Um, but I think that you know, and then you also learn by watching other people's tapes. So you don't only get to make your own tape, you get to watch everybody else's tape. And you might think that that's kind of boring, but it's really not because everybody has different styles. You're going to be in treatment teams for a long time. And I love watching other people counsel. That's how I became a better counselor, by watching other people counsel. And I get so many insights, just from maybe the way they phrase something, or maybe I noticed something and I was uncomfortable, with somebody's feelings, but a counselor really, you know, reflected empathically how somebody was feeling. I'm like, wow, that's a good way to put that. Yeah. And, we learn by watching as well. And we learn by making mistakes and, doing better next time, you know. Humans are imperfect, mistakes are there to learn from. Uh, so that's going to be our process. And then we'll learn something new and go on to the next tape. And most of this class is based on person-centered theory. And so that's Carl Rogers. And all of his basic techniques. So if you had theories, you might think this is a really simple thing. But, Rogers didn't come up with a theory and 5 books and dozens of articles over something so simplistic. Uh, you can really get pretty deep uh, with Rogerian theory. Now, the other thing is, um, you know, we're not, we're going to be with partners, and I could give you a scripted role play, but that's kind of difficult. Um, so, you know, if you want, you can make up a character, but it's got to be pretty detailed because in order to get to a deeper emotion, you really have to identify with that character. On the other hand, you could share something, you know, personal, but this is not therapy. This is just practicing basic skills and techniques. So we're not going to get into anything, no trauma, nothing like that. Um, you are in control of what you share, and you can stop at any time, or you say, time out, we're getting too deep, I'm getting uncomfortable, whatever, and change the subject, start over, take a minute, start over. But, we're not going to be therapeutic. We're only going um, to go so far. And for this class, it will be successful if you identify the deeper emotion. Because if you identify the deeper emotion, it's tied to some issue, whatever it might be. We're not going to fix the problem. Okay. Everybody is so used to talking with friends or family, and we are not going to problem solve because that's what we normally do in life. We're not going to give advice. We're not going to problem solve. We're not going to do time management. You know, if counseling was that easy, everybody would be doing it and everybody'd be paid for it. But no, this is not about time management. It's not about journaling. It's not about taking a deep breath. It's not about, problem solving, you know. So we all had a lot of bad habits before we became counselors. And it became it's our natural inclination to want to help and solve somebody's problem. But we can't do that. If we solve somebody's problem for them, if it doesn't work, who's to blame? Us. If we give advice and it doesn't work out, that's our fault. If we give people personal insights that are so obvious to us, why can't they see them? Because we're an outsider looking in, you know? But they won't own them unless they discover those insights themselves. So we can't give the client the answers. And something I might know from the very beginning or hypothesize, it might take weeks of therapy for the client to reach that insight themselves. And if they reach it themselves, then they'll own it. So, you know, and it works both ways. I get just as many insights about myself in being a therapist as a client gets, because I can place myself in the client's position. I've never experienced what a client has experienced, but I'll try to be as empathic as possible. Um, let's see. That's the class. All right, questions about we haven't gone over the syllabus yet, but that's kind of what this class is about. It's really experiential. That's also why, it's important to be present for the class. Yeah, you can miss a class, but, try to be here. Let's see. So comments, questions. All right. Well, let's go over the syllabus next. I'm going to stop recording.